I think we'll take it from there. So welcome everybody, and thank you for logging on and for giving your time to our dissemination event for the eQval project, which is co-funded by the European Union through the Erasmus Plus programme. So we're going to focus in. I must first share all the slides. So we're going to focus in on volunteering and the learning that is gained through volunteering. So volunteering serves as a transformative force, and it significantly contributes to our personal, social, and professional development. However valuable it is, the learning acquired in this context is often lacking in terms of recognition, and this project aimed to address this challenge to provide a robust and coherent framework for validating competences acquired through volunteering. So we aim to offer a clear guide to guide and support all organisations implementing learning validation systems, ensuring that the outcomes of these processes are to the highest quality standards. So we have focused on inclusivity, transparency, and quality in delivering the content of the guide. To apply clear and applicable criteria, and the objective is to promote validation processes that are understandable, accessible, and reliable. So the guide is beyond a technical tool. It actually reflects our shared commitment to promoting the value of learning gained in all contexts, including volunteering, to ensure that the competences gained through this experience are duly recognised and valued. And we invite all to apply these quality standards in their respective practices. So we tell you a little bit about the partners. Our project partners, we had a diverse consortium of 7 organisations from 6 European countries, each with significant expertise in volunteering, education, training, and quality assurance. So the coordinator was the Spanish Volunteer Platform from Spain, the National Umbrella Body for Volunteering, so SVP in Spain, and they're the national umbrella body for volunteering in Spain with more than 3 decades of experience. PV, they lead major initiatives on validating learning and setting quality standards for the third sector. So along with that, we had another Spanish partner, CESUR. They're one of Spain's largest private VET providers, and they operate 20 campuses nationwide. CESUR, they specialise in competency-based education and the recognition of prior learning. So then MTU, ourselves, we're the Irish partner. My good colleague Deirdre Goggin is the project lead for Ireland in that, and we're very much linked with industry and community development, and our commitment is there in that. Along with MTU, the next is from Belgium, the Centre for European Volunteering, CEV. They're a Brussels-based network, and they represent 60 plus volunteer involving organisations and platforms in 30 countries. So CEV is a leading voice in EU-level advocacy, research and dissemination on volunteering. Then we have CSVNet, our Italian partners. So the National Association of Italy's Volunteer Support Centres, they connect 370 local CSV offices, and CSVNet offer training, research and innovative services to strengthen volunteering and the third sector organisations. Then from Portugal, we had the Portuguese Volunteering Confederation, the CPV in Portugal. They're an umbrella org and for 32 national volunteer networks. CPV are dedicated to promoting, professionalising and recognising volunteering throughout Europe, throughout Portugal. And then we have a Romanian partner, PSI Test Consult HR, and they're a HR consultancy with extensive expertise in competence assessment, recruitment and QA processes, and they bring in the employer perspective to volunteer learning validation. So there are partners. And just to give you all some background and context as to the why and how behind our project, and the recognition of prior learning, which allows for all forms of learning to be validated in the context of a destination award, prior formal, non-formal and informal learning. So in that validation of non-formal and informal learning from volunteering, which is part of that, is it's relevant within voluntary organisations, within workplaces, and within education. And as you know, the validation process consists of 4 stages: the identification, documentation, assessment, and certification. And depending on the learning context and the organisation carrying out the validation, the 4 stages may be completely or partially addressed. In 2012, the European Council recommendation on the validation of non-formal and informal learning stated that individuals should be given the opportunity to demonstrate what they have learned outside of formal education and training to make sure of that learning for their careers and further learning. That was 2012. And this recommendation was underpinned by the idea and principle that the arrangements for validation should be linked to the national qualification systems and in line with European qualification frameworks. So 92 million adults, even the slide there says it, are involved in volunteering around the EU. And there are several validation tools developed in Europe for validating learning outcomes gained through volunteering. And within that, the policy agenda for volunteering in Europe in 2011 called to standardise the outcomes of recognition tools. And in 2019, the European Association for the Education of Adults looked to standardise the structure of certificates and adopt clear and transparent quality standards. Later again, CEDEFOP called for validation processes to generate trust by demonstrating that the requirements of reliability, validity, and quality assurance have been met. So these quality standards outline the requirement of those who support volunteers to identify and document their learning gained through volunteering. And as a motivator for the volunteer, the evidence of the acquisition and demonstration of competence acquired through volunteering can be used in many ways. So it can be used maybe for advancement within volunteering, for self-empowerment, for access to education, validation within education, and even to apply for a job. I'm just going to go forward on my slide, I hope. I might just escape and come back in because somehow my slide will not forward, but that's okay. And I'll share again. Why do the gremlin come in like that? No. Now, can you see from here?
Yeah, we can see. Yeah.
Thank you. That is super. So our project to look at the objectives. The objectives of our project were to define and disseminate across Europe the first European quality standards to validation of learning outcomes from volunteering, and to produce a manual across the 6 languages to facilitate the implementation of the European quality standards in validation of learning outcomes from volunteering, and then to organise a European Quality Award in the validation of learning outcomes from volunteering, and to promote their adoption of these quality standards for learning from volunteering. So I want to just share with you just a sense of the guide before hitting the project milestones. so we have 4 chapters in the guide, which outline the key aspects. So the first chapter really presents a theoretical framework, providing an overview of the concept of lifelong learning through the different learning contexts. And then the second chapter would look at the proposed European quality standards. They're presented in a concise enough fashion, emphasizing their purpose and usefulness depending on who is using them. And it also details the structure of the quality standards. The third chapter then elaborates in a more elaborate way each of the 23 proposed quality standards and provides a description of each of them with suggestions for possible evidence to encourage alignment. And finally, the fourth chapter presents the European policy landscape and regulatory developments related to the learning in terms of validation and recognition. So a comprehensive document. So the project summary. And before I go into that, I just want to present who can use these quality standards. So these quality standards are intended really a wide, broad basis of stakeholders for volunteers to understand how their skills and knowledge gained through volunteering can be recognised, for volunteering organisations to implement quality validation processes for their volunteers, for education and training institutions to understand and potentially integrate learning from volunteering into formal learning pathways, for employers to recognise and value the skills and competencies that individuals have gained through volunteering, and for public authorities and policymakers to support and promote the validation of non-formal and informal learning. So the project, in terms of milestones, really was around developing the manual in through the stages. And we met initially in January 2023, and at that point, the work began to generate the first version of the European quality standards. And we had these available. That first draft was ready by March 2023. And our first draft then went forward over the next time period, culminating in August 2023 after a public consultation process in each of the 6 countries, where 684 people from across Europe, representing all the various stakeholders involved in the process of validating learning outcomes from volunteering, took part in that public consultation. And so we went forward in April with the first edition. This is April 2024. The first edition of the manual was available, and that that draft was then used and trialled really in the truest sense as we prepared for the European Quality Award in validation of learning outcomes from volunteering. And that took place in Brussels, the 19th of November, in November 24. And then following on from that, following beyond the awards, we revised and improved and brought in and considered the feedback available from the participants of the award to bring the final version of the manual or the second edition in March 2025. And that's the version that's available now and available on the link. Now, again, I'm not sure why. I have to stop again and just hop out of the slide share. It won't roll forward. I have it now again.
Will I share the slides on my side?
I say it'll be okay. It just, I don't know why. Maybe the mouse is dead or something, but I have it there again now, so I'll share again. Apologies. Now I have it there. So now the quality standards. So they're divided into 2 categories. There are general quality standards and specific, each for the 4 phases of your validation process: identification, documentation, assessment, and certification. So in terms of the general, So several general quality standards are highlighted to ensure robust and creditable validation process. So the following the general standards aim to highlight the volunteer as the owner of the validation process. So it's volunteer centeredness. We ensure that the process is focused on the individual volunteer's needs and learning. Transparency. We must make the process criteria and outcomes clear and accessible for all stakeholders. Reliability. We must ensure the methods and tools used for identification, documentation, and assessment consistently produce dependable results. Validity. We must confirm that the assessment accurately reflects the learning outcomes achieved. Fairness and impartiality. We must ensure that the process is conducted without bias and provides equal opportunities for all volunteers. Accessibility. We must make the validation process accessible to all individuals, regardless of their background or circumstance. And data protection. The handling of all personal information collected during the process must be in accordance with the data protection regs. So they're the sort of general principles at play behind those general standards. And so these general standards are outside of any one of the phases. So volunteer-centred information, visibility, promotion, they must be transparent, inclusive and accessible and fit for purpose. And the volunteer is the owner and led by the volunteer. So I roll forward in terms of identification, the more specific phases. The volunteer becomes aware of their skills and knowledge in that phase, the importance of a mentor or an advisor to the volunteer and their ability to support and guide the person, that all competencies acquired are taken into account, and that the competencies are linked with a national framework of qualifications, ESCO, or other relevant standard. And those in that so there's 23 standards, so this would be standard 8, 9, 10, and 11 in the listing. The next phase then would be documentation. So standards, the documentation of the learning gained should be linked to a national framework. The ECO standards are relevant. Evidence of learning then is robust, diverse, and demonstrate a volunteer's activities, accomplishments, and learning outcomes. And the requirements of the certificate issued by a voluntary org must include specific information on the roles, responsibilities, and the activities of the volunteer. These must be stated on the certificate, and it must include information on the time frame of those who mentored and supported and guided. That's the documentation phase. Now we can revisit these if you have questions or comments or observations, but I'll roll forward and look at the assessment criteria. So firstly, it depends on the purpose of the assessment and the setting, whether it's formal or non-formal. The evaluation guide, a broad range of accepted evidence must be available and must be apparent to those involved. The assessment must be done to QA standards. The assessment must be done by the subject matter expert in the field. And the following principles apply. The learning brought for assessment must be valid, current, relevant, sufficient, authentic. So then the same scrutiny or the same external scrutiny as all other forms of assessment must apply. And the assessment must be conducted against the same standards. Curriculum. There must be training for staff available in the assessment of non-formal and informal learning. Acceptable standards of achievement. So there must be assessment rubrics available. And where employment is the goal, the knowledge, the autonomy, and the motivations of the applicant are also evaluated. And these assessment criteria then are detailed in the standards 14, 15, 16. I can list them all out. We can look at that one. There's 2 pages in the manual where the standards are listed in a concise way. We can bring that screen up in a minute. We'll go forward into the final stage, certification. On assessment, certification arising must maintain the same criteria, especially in a formal education setting. There should be no distinction as the same standards or learning outcomes are demonstrated. And that's our front page of the manual. The guide. So the manual provides the detailed guidelines and support materials to facilitate the implementation of the European quality standards in the validation of learning outcomes from volunteering. And the link is available on the eQval site. And even just to round off our session in terms of dissemination, it might be nice to just pull up the eQval website page as well. It gives very concise information as to the guide and the purpose and who it benefits. Now, just again, now that slide is clicking there. With your permission, I'm just going to stop and start again. As I start again, thank you. So I'm sharing now. So November, 19th of November 2024, we presented, there was a European Quality Award in the validation of learning outcomes from volunteering. And in that, we brought back from 22 applicants, it culminated in 5 finalists being selected. And then the task was to evaluate the 5 finalists who were Valabo, the University of Genoa in Italy, the France Benevolat from France, COC EMFE Conf in Spain, and the Autonomous University of Madrid. So our validation, the awards took place in Belgium, and we had I'm trying to find the guy's name. Cohen Nomden was the team leader for transparency and recognition of skills and qualifications at the European Commission, and he presented the awards. And our 2 winners were COMF, COC, EMFE, COMF in Spain, and Valabo in Italy. So Valabo in Italy were a volunteer service centre for the metropolitan city of Bologna. So they were a non-profit organisation established by the Volunteering Framework Law, and their function is to support and promote volunteer work in the Bologna region. They provide services to organisations and people involved in community work, and they have a validation of learning. The second, so it was the second winner, the 2 winners, and they were both really excellent in terms of the range and scope of the evidence, and their applications were strong. They were mature in terms of their brief in the field. So the second was the CONF, and they were the Spanish Confederation of People with Physical and Organic Disabilities, and they're a non-profit organisation, and they've been working since 1980 to promote the inclusion and improve the quality of life of people with physical and organic disabilities in Spain. So they're made up of 92 organisations. They represent more than 1,600 associations and more than 2.5 million people, really. So they promote public policies and programs to foster accessibility, personal autonomy, and active participation through self-representing people with disabilities in all areas of society. So they have, they run the Confalora, an initiative to recognise and validate skills acquired by volunteers in the field of volunteering. And they have an accreditation system that focus on your non-formal and informal learning. So allowing the volunteers to certify their skills in a simple way that's adapted to their needs. So both Conf and Valabo were winners in the award. They were exemplary, really. They excelled in showing how in terms of their work. So it was a very happy occasion, the 19th, and There's our photos. So now, one of our requirements is we're looking for feedback in terms of how we might just how you find the area, and we have a questionnaire. There's always a can you complete the questionnaire question. So if it's okay, I'm going to give a few moments to allow yourselves to use that QR code. That's 1028 there. So if I pause until say 10:32 in that, it'll give you an opportunity to just see, can you scan and complete the QR code, and we thank you for your feedback. I'm going to do it myself and see, can I get it to go? So it's loading there for me. Okay, now. And the questions go down. Please indicate the type of organisation, the presentation and information on the project, if it increased your knowledge in some way. Do you feel that the manual information provided during the event will help you develop competencies in using the standards? Do you plan to download, or have you already downloaded the manual? Do you plan to share the information? And have you any other comments? So it's brief enough.
If people have any questions as well and they would like to put them in the chat, we can go through them in a minute. Just in relation to this. So Claire, you've a question. You've your hand raised there.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Yes, thanks, Deirdre, and Phil, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious as to this is an amazing guide. It's so comprehensive. So well done, firstly, to I know that there's so many partners and people involved in getting it to this final stage. I guess my question is, how do you see in the Irish context this manual or guide being applied? And where it may be applied. What are your kind of thoughts on that, looking towards the future?
Okay, did I take that, Phil? Or
yeah, you can manage. Do.
Yeah, so I suppose, Claire, like when you look at the guide, there's they're the general standards and they're the more specific standards. And I think if you look through the manual, what is clear is that, there are a number of organizations that can be involved within the process. So when you look at the partnership of the project, there were the voluntary organizations or associations. Then there were people involved in formal education, and there were people kind of closer to the industry or enterprise. So, it's not that this process or what has been set out within the manual is owned by any one specific sector. It's very much, I suppose, a partnership approach, but also appreciation as to what can be done in the different sectors, but also where one sector may be able to do the 4 phases of validation, others may only be able to do identification and documentation, say, and then they would hand it over to maybe formal education for assessment and certification. So really, for us in Ireland, there are thousands of people who volunteer and who gain skills within that context, and that can be through, say, voluntary organisations, but it can also be done in the workplace through CSR and EDI activities, where employees are volunteering on behalf of an organisation, through their initiatives, but that learning isn't being captured. And so, we have looked at it, and we've done dissemination events on kind of putting more structure around what is being done, capturing the learning, valuing the learning, and so that it is in a format that can be transferred or transmitted into a different context, be it in a CV, be it in a job, in a job application, within formal education, further education, higher education, it doesn't matter. So, so I think it does translate. I think in Ireland, though, unlike maybe other European countries, we're not as mature in our approaches when it comes to volunteering, and maybe the connections between volunteering and education isn't as structured as it is within, say, the Spanish context, for instance, and the Spanish volunteering platform. They have connections with universities. But having said that, within Ireland, there are universities who give additional points for those who have been engaged in voluntary activities. So I think it is just to see, like, how could the standards fit in, what parts of the standards could fit in, and adapt them. But a lot of it is really about, providing your information, your guidance, your templates, also responsibility. The responsibility is in, it is within all organizations engaged in validation, and also the message is that validation doesn't always have to appear in formal education. It can also happen within the voluntary sector, where certificates issued by voluntary organizations would, encapsulate, say, the roles and responsibilities that somebody has had. And so if they want to go forth and go somewhere else, that the next voluntary organization are very clear as to what has that person got. I think it's, if you take it out of all of the sectors, then really it's about, acknowledging that learning is gained everywhere and by everybody, and kind of putting kind of a worth on that learning, that it informs the individual, it's empowering, it's the self-development. So there are so many benefits, I think, that, it doesn't just have to be kept within certain sectors. I think as an approach of standards, really the idea was to kind of state what needs to happen, in order to move it forward, in order for learning, say, in this case, the voluntary sector, for it to be valued, to be visible, and for even the individual to know what kind of learning they have acquired and what it will enable them to do, that there are opportunities from what they have. So I'll stop talking there because I'm going to cough.
Don't cough. Or do. And what I might do is I might just pull up that image there is just the eQval team, the team photo at the awards afterwards, so the people behind the work. And on the most left-hand side there is David Sanchez, project coordinator, and the winners are in the middle. We go forward just You know where to find us if you want further information. And can I pull up the eQval website? If I stop sharing again, I pull up, and then maybe I might just, without going into too much detail and not getting too involved with the very standards, it would be no harm either to just pitch the manual on the page 23, 24, or is it 24 and 25, where the actual quality standards are, just to see them and share them now would be good too. So I'll try and do that. And take all comments.
Yeah, Phil, just there's a question there from Siobhan.
Apologies,
she's
Siobhan.
wondering what levels might volunteers achieve certification as it is cross-sectoral. You may have answered this already. So I suppose the idea is that there isn't one set standard and one set level that a volunteer should achieve certification, that it should be informed by the National Framework of Qualifications, or there was like the ESCO standards where the role and responsibilities, and does somebody actually meet those standards, or other standards. And so there was a lot of discussion about standards, Siobhan, in the project, because it's different in every country. So but for the certification, if it's non-formal certification, could be in relation to kind of an early career volunteer, someone who has a certain level of experience, and then maybe more a senior volunteer, and their competence in the area. So, it will be, say, early career individual in any industry, then somebody who has more experience, and then maybe kind of the manager, the person who's coordinating activities. So that's the kind of idea of certification. It wasn't that everything has to result in a formal certification. They wanted to be more flexible than that it could be non-formal certification and formal certification. But I suppose for the formal certification process, that they are open, that learning will be gained through volunteering and would be valued within a formal certification process. So in the case of the Spanish partner, for instance, from a previous project, they have connected in with 7 universities, and they have built as part of that project, a kind of a template, an online template, portfolio template was built. And so they have customized it for each of those 7 universities, and they use it as kind of their RPL process, but it is in the space of volunteering, because there is capacity within those universities to value the learning of volunteering, which may not be specific to any particular discipline.
Sorry, Deirdre, thanks a million. You were actually answering the question as I submitted it. So it's a great project. Thanks a million. One thing I did notice, though, is that most people online this morning seem to be from higher ed, and I think there's huge potential here for FET as well, and maybe the lower levels. I just wanted to note that too, if that's okay.
I think
Sorry
that's important.
Yeah,
that would be important to note. Absolutely, isn't it? Yeah.
Thanks a million.
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, absolutely, Siobhan, you're right. Like, there are no limitations or parameters put around it. I would absolutely agree with you that in further education, I think there's huge potential. And also, say, in all levels of education, but in all levels of society and age profiles, there are no limitations in how it could be used. I think it's about, again, that people are supported in capturing their learning and valuing their learning. And, again, with the voluntary sector, I think those possibilities weren't available. And sorry, now, Neil Byrne was asking, do you know if there are any parts of this being put out in place across any university so far? So, like, it has been put out in some of the Spanish universities in the preceding, and I would say that it'll probably build on this again, after this project, Niamh. In terms of Ireland, huge efforts were pushed to connect with the voluntary sector. But I think, you know, sometimes there are gulfs in Ireland between different sectors. But they are aware of the fact that it exists, you know. But, you know, I think if there's, you know, I'm happy to, actually on the website, there is, and on our Extended Campus site, there is if you click on the logo of the Spanish Voluntary Organization, it brings you to their website. But I'd be happy to share the details of the Spanish partner if you would like to speak with them.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Phil, do you want to do the last? Andrina has come and she's also raised her hand.
Andrina, hello. I'm just trying to pull up the website there.
Hey, Phil, I think Claire is in before me, though, to speak.
Claire, is your a legacy hand, or is it?
No, it's not a legacy hand, but you know what, let Andrina go ahead.
Sorry,
I just
Claire.
have and I can come back in with my question after that. Andrina, go ahead.
No, I'm Andrina from QQI. I just want to say it's a really welcome. You know, I've been monitoring progress over the while it's been working, and I think it's so important. The Icelandics have a phrase where every hand counts, and obviously the framework is to make all learning matter. And this has been something we've talked about for a very long time, to find ways where all our learning is valued and recognised. And as Deirdre said, it is difficult to include everyone, and some sectors find themselves further distant, if you like, in terms of being able to navigate their way in. But I think all of our sectors, the higher education sector, the vet sector, and indeed the community and voluntary sector, have been working so hard to make these pathways visible, and to have a toolkit like this that is so clear about quality standards and about the reference points for making learning visible within the capacity, whatever the capacity is that you've got, whether you've got a JCB and I've got a garden hoe, it really doesn't matter. But it's to take whatever implements you've got and make it visible in a way that can make a pathway forward for someone to have their learning recognised, I think, is the really critical thing. I'm just back from the ENIC-NARIC meeting in Tirana. And, you know, again, hot topics there around flexible pathways, flexible learning, acknowledging the importance of recognition for the outcomes of validation or RPL. And the Global Recognition Convention, which Ireland is advancing preparations for and really interested in signing up to or acceding to, that provides for the recognition of prior learning that is documented and or certified. Preference obviously for certified, but that's not possible for everyone. But getting the documentation right, and again across the Commission, and very interested in proposals for this, for simplified documentation outcomes. But one of the things that would be really necessary within that is clarity in terms of the reference point for standards, which this provides for, but also really good information on the quality assurance of how the assessment is carried out. So this toolkit provides for that in a way that is very accessible. And I can see organisations like the GAA, like St Vincent's de Paul, like so many of the organisations, you know, around the country that are completely and absolutely, as I am in my community, reliant on voluntary services, finding this really useful. And higher education institutions are funded to provide these access pathways and to work in inclusion and to do that outreach material. So I think this is something that the HEA would be interested in. I think there's all sorts of ways that we can promote this particular work and make sure that the immense volunteer activity that is such a characteristic of the way we live in Ireland can actually be articulated for people. It was funny because we were doing some work with Uzbekistan the week before. This sounds like name dropping and it's not, but I had to give a profile of you know what we do in Ireland and trying to explain that sort of community approach is really strong for us, and just came across the stats on volunteering in the CSO site, and it really is quite extraordinary. So well done, and thank you so much for the work. I think it's a real contribution nationally, and really looking forward to seeing it come to light in all our wonderful hands, because all our hands matter. Thanks a million. Well done.
Thanks, Andrina. Sorry, Claire, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it's really a question around the volunteer sector in Ireland, and just how well equipped do you kind of think they are to implement some of these standards in with their volunteers. And the second part of that then is what help do they need in terms of funding or support to help them roll out aspects of this manual in terms of recognizing that learning that happens within whatever the volunteer work is, whether it's My Lovely Horse Rescue or the GAA or whatever. And there's so many volunteer groups out there working for these different organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
What I would say, Claire, is I would think even just for myself, as we all volunteer, but even just ourselves as human, when you're looking at the European context and being part of the project has given me sort of the understanding that, oh my God, they're just so much more organised in the broader European countries like Spain and Portugal, and they're streets ahead of us. And so and that's not a negative thing. But being honest, I just do think they're more organised, and they're more mature in terms of the arrangements that are in place to validate all forms of learning and the recognition of learning from volunteering, and that they're just a leap ahead. And we have that to grow here, and we will. But it is that first acknowledgement, I would say, it's just more organised there, and we have work to do, because as Andrina says, we all volunteer, and it's part and parcel of the Irish ethos, and every one of us, the local commitments are so important, and it'll be to come, I don't know, come the road together in becoming more organised, that's what I would observe.
Yeah, on the back of that, I think there's a real possible selling point for organizations that rely on volunteers, to be able to say to volunteers, there's potential that we can recognize your contribution down the line, because I know in some sectors there's a challenge trying to get volunteers. Now, my internet might be a bit glitchy, so if I'm breaking up, just put your hand up. Sorry, I'll be very brief. Yeah, just there might be some really positives for organizations that use volunteers to be able to indicate that they will be able to recognize the contribution through that learning. I'll be quiet because my internet's glitchy.
You're fine. But I think also, Claire, like this, within any voluntary organizations, there's different capacities, regardless of where they are internationally. So whether they're, even though, say, in Europe, say mainland Europe, the structures may be more mature, more advanced, but still there are huge disparities between the sizes of voluntary organizations. So if you're small, then obviously your capacity may be to support people to capture the learning in the way that we set out in the standards may not be the same as somebody who's a very large organization and who has a lot of people there to assist in, say, the administration of the standards. So we've had extensive discussions on that, within the project, about just the different capacities, and that you don't set up standards that are unattainable by everybody. And I suppose what the standards are really hinting or indicating is that, you should just encourage people to keep a record, to encourage people to value the learning, document their learning, keep evidence of learning, but also for voluntary organizations and education and the workplace to support in whatever way they can in achieving that, but that also the volunteer decides whether that's for them or not. So the ownership and the is kept with the volunteer. Like they decide what's for them. Like I think in Ireland, our challenge is that some people volunteer, but they don't think they volunteer. So who is a volunteer? So, we attended something, Phil and I, and there was a discussion about some people thinking they volunteer and other people thinking they don't volunteer. And it came down to the fact that, like, somebody who was given a role, so, I'm the treasurer, I'm the whatever for the year, a secretary, I volunteer. But the person who goes in and makes the tea for the match on a Saturday, or who lines out the pitch,
washes the jerseys,
just doesn't see themselves doesn't see themselves as a volunteer, even though what they're doing is volunteering. So, I think in Ireland there is, it's kind of, oh, sure, I do that because my son or my daughter or whoever is actually playing, and I just help out. It's like that I help out, but they don't see themselves as volunteering. So I think there's a lot of maybe invisible volunteering that goes on as well in Ireland, which is a challenge because it's just, it's how we define, or how we, as Phil said, we all do it. So, and because we all do it and we've always done it, then we don't necessarily put a title or, a kind of a description around it. So that, I think, is our first challenge in Ireland, where we kind of say to people, yeah, you are volunteering. Volunteering isn't categorized into certain things. It is where you are helping to do something, in your own time for somebody else, or doing something else, or help, so but I think there is the capacity challenge definitely with some of the voluntary organizations, but I think hopefully the guide gives that kind of information as to what how people can capture their learning, what kind of information should you include. So we hope that it is helpful, that people do find it helpful, and that, again, it's naming it and providing those pathways, as Andrina said, kind of making people realize what they have. I think there's so much tacit knowledge, so much invisible learning that people have. And this, in some way, as we focused in the voluntary sector, it's about making that visible, and not just visible to those outside, but also visible to the person, as to what they've done, what they've achieved, where they've contributed, and how that could be valued in another context as well. So, okay, the chat there. Okay, so Andrina's a lovely
nice
the
comment.
advantage of and disadvantage of woolly hedge, the stone wall and the wind can pass through. Very nice. And
Fabulous.
awareness, Alicia, is absolutely is the first step to recognition. So that's it. So Phil, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, and well done, Deirdre, for play. I'm just going to share the website as our finishing point, and thank you for your time and attention. Well, maybe I've just hopped on the wrong screen now. I just did. So again, I'm going to X out of that. So eQval.eu. I find that and share it. And as mentioned by ourselves, we had there's a podcast available too, which is another way of bringing across the message and the information. I don't know what I'm sharing now. Really bad. Sorry. Share. And thank you for your time and your attention. And I'm just going to X out of that. Apologies. We have the guide.
I've shared it there, Phil.
That would be super.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just to finish, literally on the screen, that is eQval, so that you can easily locate where the manual resides and tap in and out. If you wish to just experience aspects of the podcast, it's novel, reasonably easy digest to, apart from the American accent, but it's there, a very, very available resource, free to download, and welcome and applicable to so many of us all. So to round off today's session, I want to thank every one of you for your time, attention, and appreciation of the work that we've done. Thanks for logging in and keeping in touch with us. Come back if you've questions. Thanks to Deirdre, although sick, more than super in terms of contribution, and to us all and our shared commitment for this space, which is the valuing of all forms of learning. Bye-bye for now. Take care.
Thank you
Thanks
very
all.
much.
See you all again.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.